The church bell groans under a gray sky. It is not the crisp chime of celebration, nor the steady toll of evening prayer, but a dragging metallic cry, as if the iron itself mourns. Mist coils through the alleys of Avignon, like the ghost of a forgotten saint. Rain drizzles steadily, thin as breath, turning the cobblestones slick and dark. The stones remember. Every footfall, every scream, every whispered agony soak it in and never let go. In the doorway of a crumbling home, a boy of 12 presses a pewter icon against his chest. Its edges are worn smooth, the saint's face almost erased by the touch of countless fingers his, and perhaps others now buried. His bare feet are numb against the cold stone, but he does not shiver. He watches. Inside, his mother kneels at the windowsill, fingers trembling as she pushes rosemary into the crevice where glass meets wood. Not for beauty, not for scent, for protection. A ward older than the church, whispered by midwives and hedge priests, the kind of magic born from desperation, when prayer alone is too thin to hold back death. His mother murmurs as she works not in Latin, but in the tongue of her grandmother, a language half lost to books, but known well to firelight and famine. She is trying to stitch the world closed with herbs and hope. Outside, smoke trails from the thatched rooftops, black and uncertain. It carries not the scent of meat or bread, but of damp wool and burning Lycian attempt to cleanse what no water can. The plague doesn't knock, it breathes through walls. The boy's father once carved saints from limestone, chiseling robes that folded like wind, faces that gazed skyward. Now, he pulls carts that creak with the weight of the unspoken. Wrapped in sheets, the bodies wear the same rosaries, the same boots they did in life, as if the soul might one day return, surprised to find the world unchanged. At the gates, he speaks to no one, just nods, just lifts the wooden bar, and lets the weight roll beyond the city walls, where the lime pits bloom white like salted earth. The boy does not cry. He listens. He listens to the way a neighbor says, "Good morning," without meeting eyes. He hears the tremble behind the baker's refusal when a customer offers coin instead of barter. He hears the way the priest, once steady as stone, now falters mid-sermon, his voice cracking like ice on a thawing river. One night, the boy watches through the keyhole as a widow cups her hands around her daughter's face, lips moving fast. The child is pale, her skin glows like wet parchment. The door remains closed, a final rite offered through splinters and breath. In the square, children no longer run. A single dropped apple lies bruising beneath the rain, and no one picks it up. Hope does not vanish in a scream. It dies slowly like a candle snuffed by a cough, like petals browning one by one. It dies in silence, in the rituals we keep doing long after we've forgotten why. Lighting candles, boiling vinegar, sowing rosemary, each act a thread we hope might tether us to something still living. But the boy returns to the cathedral. He is too small to be noticed, too quiet to be feared. Each night, after the doors are bolted, and the bishop's voice fades behind stone walls, he slips in with the dusk. He sweeps ash from beneath the altar, where wax drips have pooled like tears. He lights tapers with a flint that once belonged to his grandfather, steadying the flame against the draft. Sometimes he prays, not the prayers he's been taught, but those he invents for the sparrows nesting in the eaves, for the shoemaker's daughter, for the shadow beneath his bed that doesn't always vanish when the light comes. He doesn't ask for miracles, just for remembering, that someone, somewhere, might remember this place if the world forgets. On the third Thursday, he finds the old priest weeping behind the pulpit. The man does not hear him enter. His shoulders are hunched, his hands trembling. He clutches the chalice not like a symbol, but like a lifeline, a rusted anchor in a sea of smoke. The boy does not speak. He kneels, quietly, and begins to clean the wax from the steps. That night, the bells toll again, once, twice, 10 times, 20, 100 deaths this month. Each chime rings not as punctuation, but as warning, as remembrance, as defiance. The cathedral walls echo with it, humming like a ribcage in mourning. And still, the boy listens. When the night deepens and the city sleeps fitfully, he walks to the far edge of the nave, where the mosaics are cracked and half swallowed by shadow. There, beneath a half-shattered window, he carves a name, his sister's. The stone resists at first, then yields, not cleanly, but with grit and flake. He doesn't stop, not until each letter holds its place in the dust. She died on a Tuesday. He remembers her laugh like leaves skittering across stone. She had a doll made from straw and linen. She used to ask if angels could catch fevers. He never answered her. Now he does, softly. To the dark. Yes, even angels. Outside, the rain becomes a whisper, the kind that makes roofs leak, the kind that creeps into bone. The boy lies beneath the altar now, curled into the velvet folds of an abandoned stole. His breath is slow. The icon rests against his chest, warm from his skin. He dreams of bells not tolling, but singing. Of a garden behind the cathedral, where rosemary grows wild and untouched. And in his dream, his sister stands beside him, alive not in body, but in memory, in echo, in the act of remembering. She lives, somewhere beyond the city. The lime pit smolders quietly beneath the earth. No smoke, no cry, just soil, soft with forgetting. But in Avignon, beneath a groaning sky, a boy remembers, and so life persists not through strength, but through the sacred art of not letting go. Tomorrow, the bells will toll again, but tonight, a taper still burns. A low fog slides over the River Thames, cloaking the London docks in ghostly white. There is no sun, only the pale memory of one, smothered behind wet sky and chimney smoke. The ropes creak. The tide murmurs secrets. Only the dead understand. A ship rocks gently in the harbor, its hull swollen with wool ballast thick, damp, pungent. Below deck, the lantern swings, casting crooked shadows on a young apprentice, hunched over a leather pouch. His hands are ink-stained and trembling, not from fear, but ambition. He counts coins, clinks of silver, dreams of ascent. He does not notice the burlap sack that shifts in the dark, nor the faint, gurgling breath that no longer belongs to the living. London, 1348. And something ancient has entered the city, not with sword or sermon, but on the backs of rats and the breath of strangers. Days pass. The apprentice emerges in Cheapside, his eyes fever-bright, limbs hollow. He leans against a well, retching between spasms. A blackened gland pulses beneath his jaw, like a swallowed plum. Onlookers recoil. One woman mutters a prayer, forming the sign of the cross with her apron-worn hands. The apothecary is summoned. Vinegar, sage, a black feathered mask shaped like a beak, but there is no cure, only waiting, only prayers outpacing medicine. The streets begin to hollow, merchants vanish behind barred doors, children speak in whispers, their games silent now, chalk forgotten on cobbled stones. In Bishopsgate, the seamstress listens through stone walls, coughs bloom like bruises in the silence. Her husband has gone to bury their eldest, taken swift and wordless by the midnight fever. He has not returned. In his absence, she lights a taper and threads her needle not to mend, but to ward. She wraps their daughter in linen, soaked in lavender and clove, stitched with trembling hands. Each pass of the needle a quiet defiance, each knot a prayer too fragile for the chapel. She hangs Saint Sebastian's icon by the door. The martyr stares back pierced with arrows, yet alive. She does not believe in miracles, but she believes in symbols. She believes in the scent of rosemary hung above the bed, in the salt lines across the sill. Then chalk. Outside, beneath the hush of dawn, a hooded figure moves from house to house. One step, one mark, one judgment. Her breath holds, a scrape of lime across wood, an X, the symbol of contagion, of being counted among the already gone. Inside, the little girl dreams. She dreams of snow, clean, unspoiled, silent. She dreams of her brother laughing in icon, aware that no such snow will ever touch his face again. She smiles in sleep, her hands curled like petals. Her mother watches, wondering how long a child can dream against the weight of death. The window panes drip with fog. The city exhales decay. Somewhere far, bells toll for no one in particular. Then, dusk, the wheel of a cart groans outside slow, deliberate. The seamstress knows its sound. It is the cart for the dead. She dares not look, but she feels it. The shudder in the wood beneath her feet, the echo in the grain of the floorboards, as if the city itself were bracing against its own unraveling. She closes her eyes, and in that silence, she realizes, it is not the fear of dying that undoes her, it is the knowing that no one will carry her name when she does. No son left to speak it, no husband left to whisper it, only a girl in lavender linen, asleep beside Saint Sebastian. London holds its breath. Churchyards spill beyond their stone confines. Gravediggers work in shifts until they too vanish into the same pits they dig. The priest's voice grows hoarse with benedictions no one hears. The candles sputter low, and yet, in one window, above the plague's black tide, a girl dreams of snow, and in her dream, the snow covers everything. The market, the bells, the ships, the rats, and finally her house, a house, with an X on the door, and a mother watching. But in the dream, there is no death, only silence, a perfect muffled silence, the kind that comes before rebirth. And so, as night settles over the city, the wind carries no cries, only the soft thud of doors being closed forever, and one seamstress, eyes hollow and hands folded, waits for morning. If it comes, somewhere, in the east, a new ship has docked. Another apprentice prepares to disembark, coins tucked in his coat, cough in his lungs. He has heard whispers of what lies ahead, but he believes he will outrun it. They all do. The plague is not swift, it is patient. It waits inside ships, inside men, inside prayer, and even as the fog lifts from the Thames, the shadow only deepens. The next chapter will begin with fire, and the burning of bodies no one can name. The wind screams across the Carpathian foothills, dragging long shadows through the trees, like claws raking through snow. It carries more than cold. It carries mourning. A scream once swallowed in furs, now echoes across the frost-bitten hamlet. Antlers jut from a shrine like ancient fingers, bound with red cloth that whips and cracks in the wind. The candles fat with sorrow weep wax that trails like tears onto the stone. No bells toll, no priest chants, only Baba moves hooded, stooped, breath fogging in bursts. Her feet crunch frost beneath leather worn to silk. Mugwort in one hand, salt in the other. Her knuckles are stiff, her spine crooked, but her hands still know death when it lingers. She leaves offerings not to God, but to something older. She whispers not to the Virgin, but to the veiled shadows that crouch behind hearthstones and drink the warmth of men. Tonight, the snow is not clean. Ash mixes with flake. Beneath spruce boughs, cloaks hide shapes too small, too still. They lie unmarked, save for the crows who perch, like monks around a dark chapel. Eyes like ink beads glint in judgment. The graves cannot be dug not in this earth, this season, this curse. The villagers watch from behind shutters. Children clutch dolls without faces. Men grip wood not for fire, but for spears. And Baba walks among them like smoke, part memory, part warning. They say she came from the mountains, where wolves listen to the stars. They say she has lived 3 lifetimes. No one says it to her face. Her fingers touch each doorway. Salt, herb, a murmur, a silence, then the next, and the next. Inside one hut, a child lies pale. The skin shines with sweat, but the lips are cracked. Fever curls his spine like a root shriveling in fire. Baba kneels. Her palms are rough as bark, but her touch is gentle. She mutters old words, not prayers, songs, the kind sung before battle, or birth, or storms. Hold him down, she says. The mother hesitates. The father obeys. From a pouch, Baba draws sheep gut soaked in tincture. She binds his wrists, then ankles, then forehead. The child shakes. Spasms, foam at the lips. He dreams too fast. Baba whispers. The body cannot follow. A sigh like steam escapes her throat. Hours pass, or years. Time stretches thin when death sits close. When she finishes, she nods once and leaves a bone token on the child's chest. A spiral. A return. But the rot moves faster than her chance. It skips from child to child, like wind from chimney to chimney. It leaves pustules and silence. The priest does not come. The city walls are closed. The road is watched by dogs who howl at no moon. Then the boy, her blood coughs. She hears it before she sees it. A rasp, a wet crackle in the dark. Her hut is quiet. The fire low, the herbs hung to dry, twist slowly from the rafters. He sits near the hearth, knees drawn to chest, eyes wide, sweat shining like melted ice. Luca, she says. He turns, smiles, then coughs again, and blood blossoms on his sleeve like a poppy. She does not weep. She presses a hand to his cheek, hot, too hot. His pulse dances, then falters, then runs like a deer through snow. In the silence, she chants. She calls names that were buried before Christ. She spills her own blood onto the stones. She lays her face against his and gives him breath when he cannot find his own. My eyes if you need them, she murmurs. My warmth, my hands. But the night does not hear. By dawn, only embers remain. She wraps him in her shawl, rocks him, sings lullabies, older than churches. Then she places him beneath the hearth, the place of fire, of center, of home. She carves the bone herself. One word, one shape, return. When the priest finally comes, he does not knock. He arrives swaddled in oilcloth and ash, the mask of pestilence hiding his mouth, his eyes glassy like a corpse already. Behind him a donkey cart full of quicklime and fear. He speaks of sin, of cities buried for lust, of trials in heaven. No one listens. The villagers look to Baba. Even the youngest, with sores on their lips, glance toward her hut. She emerges, as the priest intones Latin. No more, she says. Her voice is gravel and night. You defy Rome, the priest asks. I defy forgetting, she replies. A silence thicker than snow follows. Then a woman, her arm bandaged, her face hollow, kneels. Then a man, then others. They do not face the cross, they face the shrine. The priest speaks louder, louder still, but his words float, empty as frost. No warmth, no food, no shelter, only rules. Baba steps forward. In her palm, a circle of bone. Tonight we call to what remembers us, she says. That night, the shrine grows. More antlers, more cloth, more flame. Children leave dolls with button eyes. Old men offer bread soaked in blood. Women lay bits of hair, teeth, soil from beneath beds. The candles burn blue. The sky does not clear. Still they kneel. Still they sing. The priest leaves before dawn. He leaves behind lime and sermons. He is not missed. Baba too is fading. The cough catches her in sleep. Her fingers tremble as they wrap herbs, but she remains. She teaches the children how to shape runes from bone, how to read fire, how to salt a door so grief cannot enter. Her words are slow now, her breath short, but her eyes clouded, as they are see more than sky. One night, beneath the waxy moon, she feels him. Luca, not in body, not in voice, but in warmth. The hearth flares once, then settles. She smiles. The next morning, she does not rise, but the villagers do not scream. They lift her gently, wrap her in wool, lay her beneath her own hearth, and mark the stone again, the same rune, return. Outside the snow thickens, but it does not silence the hymn. It echoes in every hut, every cradle, every bitter throat, not of ending, but of memory, of a promise older than penance, of a warmth that never left. And far beyond the foothills, beyond where Rome dares ride, a wind stirs in the mountains. It smells of pine, and ash, and something waking. A scream once echoed through the narrow alleys of Siena, a merchant's wife wailing at the loss of her youngest son. But now, even the screams have vanished. Silence has settled like a shroud. heavier than any cathedral bell could toll, and still, the bells do not toll. Not for the dying, not anymore. The market square of Siena, once a jubilant theater of lute music, roasted chestnuts, and gossip-laced laughter, now lies cloaked in a gray rot. Where bread once sold warm from the ovens, rats scurry over stalls, the scent of tallow smoke coils through the stone streets, clinging to the skin, to the soul. Laughter is gone. In its place, the rasp of breath behind shutters, the sob of a priest with no sacraments left to give. High above, in a weather-stained palazzo, Caterina counts her rosary beads with trembling fingers. Not from age she is young, still, but from the weight of what she carries. One by one, the beads click in her hands, like bones. She does not pray for miracles. Miracles have grown shy in this city. She prays only that the fever will spare one more breath. Her youngest brother lies curled in a velvet-draped bed that no longer feels noble. His cheeks flush with the fire of illness, his lips dry and cracked, his eyes when they open speak of purgatory. He murmurs sins he never dared confess in life, even as a boy, stolen coins, lies to tutors, a kiss shared in secret behind the chapel. His voice cracks like frost-split glass. Caterina listens. She does not judge. She cradles his sweat-soaked head and hums lullabies from their childhood songs. Their mother once sang in a garden now overrun with thistle. The servants have vanished. They slipped away in the night, like ghosts, or perhaps they are ghosts now. The physician came days ago, his silk gloves reeking of rose oil and despair. He offered no remedies, only trembling hands and red-rimmed eyes. He was last seen weeping beside the cathedral, murmuring that God had turned his face away from Siena. So Caterina prepares alone. She boils vinegar until the air stings her eyes. She stuffs cloves into oranges until her fingers bleed citrus and spice. She scrubs the marble halls, the stairwells, the door handles again and again until her knuckles are raw and red. Her father's ring lies in a dish by the hearth, too loose for her brother's withered hand, too weighted with absence for hers. In the silence between chores, she writes names in the family ledger, first her cousins, then an aunt, then her mother, the ink smeared by tears she will not admit, each name crossed out like a chapter ending too soon. The pages grow darker with every stroke. Outside, the plague does not knock. It marches. Cloaked figures drag carts down the alleys, ringing tiny bells no church dares echo. Black hoods, hollow chants, linen sheets flutter from windows above, like surrender flags, stained crimson and brown, a warning, or perhaps a farewell. The air carries the scent of ash, of rosemary burned in desperation, of death trying to mask itself. But on the third day, something changes. As the sun sets behind the broken spire of San Domenico, Caterina hears music, not the echo of choirs or the noble moan of a lute, but something stranger, lighter, children, singing. She freezes by the window, still clutching a cloth soaked in vinegar. The melody lilts upward, defiant and pure. She parts the shutters and peers into the alley below. There, amidst the rot and ruin, dance three children too young to know grief. A boy twirls with a wooden spoon as his partner. A girl in torn slippers spins like a leaf in wind. Another claps in rhythm, cheeks flushed with mischief. They laugh a sound so alien it makes Caterina's chest ache. Their joy rings louder than the bells that no longer dare sing. No adults watch. No hand pulls them back. In their innocence, they are immune to despair, if only for a moment. Caterina leans her head against the wooden frame. She watches until her arms go numb, until the tears sting less than the silence, until a smile, fragile, flickering, dares break across her face. If joy can still breathe, she whispers, then so can we. Behind her, her brother stirs. His fever has not broken, but his breath comes softer now. The oranges still sit by the bed, half rotting, but the cloves cling stubbornly to their pulp, as if protecting something sacred. She kneels once more and murmurs a lullaby, the same one the wind once carried through olive groves. the same one their mother sang after storms. Night falls gently, and for the first time in weeks, it brings no screams. The stars above Siena blink with indifference, but the city breathes still. Somewhere, deep in the Duomo, a priest lights a candle and dares to chant again. Somewhere, a baker tests dough for the first time in days. Somewhere, the children's song lingers half magic, half madness, as if to say, the story is not over. And Katerina, daughter of a dying house, smiles with cracked lips and bleeding hands. She does not know what tomorrow will bring, but tonight, the bells are silent, not out of death, but out of awe. For even in the shadow of plague, Siena has remembered how to dance. And from that remembrance, something else stirs. Not just defiance, not just survival, but hope. A quiet flickering hope like a candle in the fog waiting to be carried into the next chapter. Torchlight danced along the walls of Mont Saint-Michel like restless spirits refusing sleep. Shadows crawled across stone elongated, twitching, as if breathing. The sea roared far below, clawing at the rocks with cold, salt-bitten fingers, as if trying to reach what it could not touch. Above, in the cloister, cloaked figures moved like echoes, their chants trembling not with piety, but with fear. The Compline hymn rose in fractured harmony, Latin syllables cracking on parched tongues. Somewhere in the bell tower, a raven shifted, unseen, and croaked once before retreating into shadow. Down in the scriptorium, where wax pooled like tears beside candles, Brother Etienne hunched over parchment. His quill scratched out the funeral rite again, and again. He was no longer a scribe by calling, but by necessity. Each night he copied the same text, each letter a weight dragging his soul deeper into doubt. Outside, the world rotted, and inside these walls silence had grown louder than prayer. The abbot had closed the gates weeks ago. No traders, no pilgrims, no news, but still she came. A girl, fevered and barefoot, appeared at the threshold, just before the tide sealed the causeway. She carried no name, only a broken rosary, and a stare that seemed older than the stones beneath her. Her lips cracked with thirst, her body burned with sickness. They carried her in as the waves swallowed the land behind her. Some called her a test, others, an omen. Brother Mathieu muttered of spirits in disguise. The cook crossed himself until his hands shook, but Brother Etienne saw something else. She was placed in the infirmary beneath faded icons, and the scent of vinegar and smoke. It was Etienne who sat beside her, night after night, his ink-stained fingers brushing sweat from her brow. He spoke softly as he wrote. Words meant more for himself than for her. There were saints who bled, he whispered. Saint Denis carried his head, after they cut it from his shoulders. Saint Agatha's flesh was torn, and still she sang. They suffered, but they remembered. They remembered that heaven listens, even when it does not speak. The girl stirred only in fever dreams. Once, she murmured something too slurred to understand. Etienne imagined she was naming stars, or saints, or perhaps just the sea. But he kept speaking. I used to write maps, he said one night, eyes hollow from sleeplessness, of lands I've never seen, rivers that may not exist. But now, I write rites for men I have eaten beside, laughed beside, and buried. Days passed like mist blurring, evaporating, reforming. The tide came and went. The sky remained gray, unblinking. Etienne told the girl about a comet he once saw when he was a child, about the way his mother braided wheat into the shape of the cross before harvest, about a dream where God walked the cloister in silence, dragging chains that rang like bells. One morning, just before the 6th hour, she opened her eyes, cloudy, mute, but alive, and then she reached out. Her hand, delicate and shaking, touched his. Etienne did not flinch. For the first time in weeks, he stopped writing. His fingers trembled, not from fever, but from remembrance, from the fragile weight of human contact. The girl said nothing, neither did he. That night, the abbot fell ill. His voice cracked during lauds, and by vespers he could no longer stand. He whispered for the holy oil, then another monk, then another. The sound of coughing filled the dormitories, like winter wind. Etienne kept vigil. He tended the girl. He read psalms aloud, though the words felt thinner now, like parchment left too long in damp. The other monks began avoiding the infirmary. They feared the girl. They feared Etienne. They feared each other. Still he sat. Still he wrote. Not rites anymore, but names, memories, fragments. Brother Jérôme, who once sang of birds nesting in the abbey eaves. Brother Augustin, who carved stars into the wooden spoons. Brother Nicholas, who could not read, but wept during every sermon. Etienne inked them onto scraps, tucked them into the folds of his robe, as if trying to keep them from dissolving into the silence. The girl for a time grew better. She sipped broth. She opened her eyes long. Once, she tried to sing just a note, broken and dry, but Etienne wept when he heard it. But then, as suddenly as she had improved, the fever returned. The final night, the winds howled harder than the monks had ever heard. Shutters cracked. Doors moaned. The chapel candles refused to stay lit. In the infirmary, Etienne held her hand as her breaths grew shallow. She did not cry, nor did he. He told her the stars would remember. That silence was not the absence of God, but the weight of his waiting. She died before dawn. He buried her himself. He wrapped her in the cloth from the altar, an act that would have been forbidden. Once, he carried her body to the eastern slope, where the soil met the rising sun, and dug into the earth until his fingers bled. No other monk joined him. They watched from the cloister windows, hands tucked in sleeves, lips moving in hollow prayer. Etienne did not mark her grave with a cross. He marked it with a circle drawn in stone, a symbol of the stars, of cycles, of the silence that comes before dawn. And when the tide rose that evening, it sounded less like mourning, and more like breath. The next night, Etienne did not chant with the others. He returned to the scriptorium. But he did not write. He sat in silence, surrounded by blank parchment, his ink dry, his candle unlit. He stared at the shadows on the walls, shadows that no longer danced, only waited. Above him, the tower bell did not ring, and below, the sea continued its endless rhythm, not washing away what had been lost, but remembering it, waiting for what would come next. And somewhere, in the eastern sky, a pale light flickered through the fog, soft as breath against glass, setting the stage for what dawn might bring. The fog sat heavy over the vineyards, not like a veil, but a weight thick, unmoving, and damp with sorrow. Grape leaves curled in on themselves, brittle and brown, as if ashamed to have once promised sweetness. Between the skeletal rows, wind whispered over forgotten soil, brushing past empty baskets, meant for harvest. The morning bell rang. It rang not for prayer, nor for work, nor for warning, but because it always had. Because the bell ringer, old and bent like the oak cane he leaned on, believed the sound was a stitch in time, that if he ceased, the world might come undone, as thread from an unraveling sleeve. So each morning, as the sun bled weakly through the mist, he pulled the frayed rope, and let the chimes echo over silence. No one came, no one had for weeks. In the center of the village, once carved with songs and sweat, stood the carpenter's house, its door crooked, but stubborn, much like the man within. His hands, thick with veins and sawdust, had once touched the rafters of cathedrals. He knew the language of joints, the symphony of grain and glue. He had built arches that kissed heaven. Now he built boxes. Coffins lined his workshop like mute judges, each one crafted with reverence, not fear, pine for the poor, oak for the noble. He smoothed each corner, as if wiping tears. Death, to him, was not a thief. It was a guest who stayed too long. His daughter moved like breath beside him. She was slight, with eyes like thawing frost. While he worked wood, she painted birds delicate, wild things across the walls of their dim cottage. Sparrows for sorrow, falcons for defiance, doves for peace. She said the birds helped the dead find their way. He never asked where she learned that. The fever came on a Tuesday. It arrived quiet and invisible, as all monsters do. First, a flush to her cheeks, then sweat that clung to her hair like morning dew. He laid her beneath the window, and placed cold cloths on her brow, whispering the names of saints he barely remembered. But his hands, so sure with timber, trembled uselessly over flesh. He did not pray for her survival. He prayed for her memory, to recall the sun's warmth, the laughter that used to live in the bell ringer's tower, the wild scent of grapes before the rot. To remember being alive, even if briefly, even if dimly. She asked to paint. And so, he brought the paints, but they were dry. In desperation, he reached for the urns, his wife's ashes, his brother's, mixed with water and color, they became pigment. He said nothing, as he handed her the brush. She understood. She painted a bluebird, then a goldfinch, a wren, a robin, their wings spread across the walls, each stroke fluttering between memory and faith. He painted with her, a trembling stroke, a breath held. The birds multiplied, now perched on ceiling beams, flying across door frames. They circled her bed like silent sentinels, like choir boys holding vigil. Each one, a farewell with feathers. Her hands grew slower, paler. On her final morning, she painted a swallow, mid-flight, wings outstretched. She died with the brush still warm in her hand. The carpenter did not weep. Not that day. He cleaned the bristles, folded her hands, and sat beside her as the candle burned low. Outside, the bell rang. Once, twice. He waited until dusk. He did not dig. Instead, he went to the chapel, the one long abandoned by priest and penitent. Its pews lay broken, eaten by moss and memory. He chose the sturdiest ones, remembering where they once groaned beneath joyful hymns and mourning robes. He took his tools, and by moonlight, carved a boat not wide, but elegant, curved like a question. He lined the inside with her paintings, carefully torn from the walls, each bird placed beside her like old friends. He laid her body in it gently, wrapped in linen the color of milk. Upon her chest, he placed the final brush. On her lips, a single grape that had survived the blight. He pulled the boat to the Loire. The river was quiet, obedient to sorrow. Fog clung low, curling at the banks, like fingers reluctant to let go. He stepped into the shallows, boots soaking, breath visible. The current was slow, as if the water itself mourned. He released the boat. It floated first uncertainly, then with grace. A small candle flickered near her feet, casting shadows of the painted birds onto the hull. Her face glowed faintly, as if lit from within. He watched until she disappeared past the bend. And then, as if cued by memory, the bell rang again this time, not from the village, but from across the water, distant, echoing, reverent, not in grief, in honor. He walked home through the vines. Their twisted arms reached out, barren, like mothers who had forgotten how to hold. Inside, the walls were bare now, just wood, empty. But above the hearth, he saw one bird remain, a tiny lark, half-finished, its eye incomplete. He did not finish it. He could not. Instead, he carved a perch for it from cedar, placed it just below the paint, a place to land. That night, the wind spoke through the rafters, not as howl, but hymn. And the carpenter dreamed not of coffins, nor cathedrals, but of birds flying over rivers, lit by candlelight, feathers brushing starlight, and a daughter smiling as sunlight warmed her face. Snow falls in silence, thick as grief. Each flake kisses the rooftops of Krakow, with the softness of farewell, burying soot and ash beneath a shroud of white. But beneath this tender veil, sorrow marches. Iron scrapes stone. Chains drag behind barefoot penitents as they shuffle through the city's frozen streets, bleeding, chanting, trembling, hoods low, eyes closed. Every lash against their skin is not just pain, but prayer. Their cries coil through the timbered alleys, echoing like the toll of ancient bells. Miserere nobis, Damen, Lord have mercy. Amidst them walks a woman, taller than the rest, not by stature, but by resolve. Annika. She does not weep. Her eyes are hollow, beyond tears. Her back is straight, despite the blood. She wears a cloak too large for her husband's. Its lining is stitched with worn wolf fur, a relic from a better winter. Her feet are blue with cold, but she walks not out of repentance, but remembrance. Her sons are gone, her neighbors disappeared, her voice silenced too long by the weight of mourning, and so she marches, not for salvation, but because standing still has become unbearable. Behind her, the city chokes on incense and rot. Crosses hang on doors now marked with ash. The nobles hide, the priests offer holy water in silver basins. But the people walk and bleed and beg. Yet Anika walks for something else, for someone else. And when the procession disappears beyond St. Mary's Basilica, she turns east toward the forest. There, the trees hold secrets older than scripture. The pines whisper with wind and memory. And deep within that wooded hush, a cellar glows with quiet life. A door opens to the scent of clove, elderberry, and firewood. Shelves sag beneath jars of dried rosehips and folded parchment. A candle flickers, and beside it, hands steep a tincture into a cracked bowl. Rabbi Moshe. He is older than the war, older than the crown's peace. A scholar, a healer, a man once exiled for being too kind in a world too cruel. He wears layers of wool and humility, and he does not flinch when Anika enters. She does not ask for balm. She does not ask for a cure. She asks him how to live, when all that tethered her to the earth has been torn away. He answers not with medicine, but with memory. There is a psalm, he says, voice like cedar bark, that says even exile is holy, if it brings you closer to what matters. Sometimes the absence of a place is the presence of God. Anika says nothing, but her breath shudders. That night, she sits in his cellar, lighting a single beeswax candle. She takes a piece of coal from the hearth, and kneels at the wall. On the stone, she writes the names of her sons not once, but twice. Once in Polish, once in Hebrew. The letters blur as her fingers tremble, but she does not stop. Each name is a stone laid on the altar of memory. Outside, wolves howl like forgotten prayers. When she returns to the city, she walks no more. She opens her door wide. No longer the widow in the shadows, Anika becomes the fire in the hearth for others. She takes in orphans, bathes the fevered, wraps the shivering in cloth stitched from old curtains. Her home, once quiet with sorrow, becomes a sanctuary carved from the wreckage. A new psalm, written in acts of mercy. She boils broth from roots and bones, her sleeves stained with the labor of care. She whispers lullabies she can no longer sing to her own children, and the walls of her home echo with footsteps once silenced by fear. A boy with burns, a girl who no longer speaks, a man marked by the plague, but still breathing. She tends to them all, not because it will save her, but because it reminds her she still exists. And in that tending, her soul begins to stir again. One morning, before the frost has melted, the bells of Krakow ring, but not for death. They ring for mass, not a funeral, but a gathering, a breath, not a gasp. The people step out, blinking into the gray light. For the first time in months, they do not cover their faces. The priest lifts the host beneath the ribs of the cathedral, and Anika watches from afar not to believe, but to remember. There is still something left. In the alleyways, rumor spreads like thawing water, that maybe the curse is lifting, that maybe penance was heard, that maybe the fever has moved on. But Anika knows better. It wasn't the lashes, it wasn't the bells, it was the lighting of one candle in a forest cellar, the writing of names in two tongues, the choice to open a door instead of closing it. She walks through her home that night, and counts the breaths sleeping under her roof. 10, 12, maybe more. She cannot remember all their names, but she knows each story. She has folded their clothes, washed their wounds, watched nightmares leave their eyes. The snow still falls, but now, it falls like a hush, not a burial. Somewhere beneath the earth, beneath the forest roots and limestone cellars, the memory of her sons lingers, but not in pain, in peace. She sees them not in their death, but in the living, in the quiet courage of each soul she shelters. Outside, the wolves are quiet, and Anika, in the stillness, lights another candle, one for those she could not save, one for those she still might. Tomorrow, she will walk again, not in chains, but with purpose. Tomorrow, she will return to Rabbi Moshe. She will ask him not how to survive, but how to rebuild, and the chapter will turn not with the toll of a bell, but with the sound of footsteps in thawing snow, heading toward what remains.